Started?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's have some fun with mental models here. I have prepared some topics for us to discuss here. First of all, we start by defining what mental models are and why do we really need them. And then I will start to go about some of the most useful mental models that I use frequently. Obviously, what I want to do is to create a catalog of mental models and sort them by different categories. And then this could be a body of knowledge that will keep growing. But let's start with the basics today. So mental models, it starts by actually organizing the knowledge that we have about a particular domain or about a particular scenario that we want to understand. So it starts by organizing the knowledge in a certain way. You can also say it is basically a representation of the particular representation of the world or a representation of the problem domain that we are talking about. And why do we want to organize the knowledge? Because knowledge consists of too many facts, too much details are there, and it's humanly impossible for us to remember all the facts. And so we want to condense all the facts into some form that we can efficiently remember and apply. And that's what we mean by organizing the knowledge. I will take some examples to demonstrate that point. Or rather, let's do it right now. This particular example of linear regression model. So I'm going to use the machine learning model as an example. Then I go back to the simple commonsensical mental models. So I hope everybody understands what linear regression is, right? So it's basically in a very simple form. If you have only two variables to deal with, and then they are correlated in a certain way. So you can imagine that this is basically the representation of how a particular value in X relates to a particular value in Y. Right? Now, if you have to remember thousands of these points and what X means when it is of a certain value, what Y is that, you cannot humanly do that. And therefore, we want to sort of condense it into a piece of knowledge. Basically, that is going to be a line that cuts through like this that fairly represents the what should be the value of Y when X is of a certain value. So this line, mathematically, we use this formula, y is equal to mx plus b, where we say this b here is this y-intercept, and then the m here, these are the only two variables in this. The m here is what we call the slope. So slope is this particular angle of the line. This is basically the slope. So by having this, um, now we condensed the whole body of knowledge in this particular system into this simple formula here, and that's a model here. Now, what is this model going to do? How is it going to help us? First of all, it is going to help us to explain the current world. So that's the most important part. So which means, suppose if there are some points that I have missed, it comes in this point about X I have missed. So I can actually use this model to, if I try to hit it, this point in reality could be somewhere here, or maybe even closer to that line itself. So it helps me to explain my existing world, and it is also going to help me to explain or predict the future. So that's the most important aspect of the mental models. It's going to help me to predict. So which means if I in the future, if I encounter some value of X, which I have not seen, but in the future I'm encountering something like this here, and because of this model, I'm able to find out that for this X, Y could be somewhere here. So that's the whole point about predicting. Yeah. So if we don't do this, which means the question is, are we even thinking clearly? If we don't organize our knowledge in this way, are we even our explanation of the current phenomena in the world, is it even accurate? Or when we come out with some predictions, on what basis we are saying that something is going to happen? So without having a model, this is where the challenges are. But so that means if you're talking about a mental model, not always mental models are going to be mathematical. They can be much simpler way of presenting the knowledge. But mental models are actually going to give us some ways to basically, if I can extend the dimension. So we talk about mental models help us to think clearly, and they help us to explain our current world. They help us to basically predict. So in predict, what we are talking about is making decisions. So this is in normal life. We are actually talking about making decisions in a very informed way. So if you're talking about if anyone is saying this is my mental model, you can use this 1, 2, 3, 4 to understand how accurate is the model or how efficient is the model. Is it helping to think clearly? Is it helping us to explain the current world? Is it helping us to predict the future, or even making some tough decisions? Then that particular model, you can say it's a mental model. Yeah. So very interestingly, if you look at the machine learning models, this is exactly what is happening, right? So the organizing the knowledge part is what we mean by the graph below. It could be as simple as that, but there are much complex machine learning models, probabilistic models, etc. Now, what happens here is there is a iterative cycle that happens here, right? So we use the current world, and then we create a model to explain. And then if the explanation is not good enough, we continue to train, we continue to keep iterating the model itself until we know that the model explains the world sufficiently accurately. And this is what we call the process of machine learning model training, supervised and unsupervised ways of training the model to do that. So in the linear regression algorithms basically do exactly this. So the algorithm may first, start off with some line like this, and then it understands that this line does not actually explain the world thoroughly, and then the line can go this way, or it can start to go this way, and finally it will end up with this particular line, which kind of explains the world more accurately, and then that's the model itself is. So similarly, mental models go through that method also. We use a mental model to explain things, and if we think that there is an anomaly in our explanation, then we keep iterating through the model, and then until we get sufficient amount of accuracy in all these 4 dimensions. Okay, so far so good. Why we need mental models and what it is. So the idea is, if we don't know, if we don't use mental models, we are going to be inefficient. We are going to be inaccurate, and that's the difference between people who are really genius and the rest of the people. Okay, now I'll start with some quick examples of my mental model. This is one of my favorites, and probably we have talked about this in an informal manner, breaking the arguments. So again, here arguments is not something that we fiercely argue nowadays, but in the old philosophical Greek philosophy, this is basically arguments are basically a systematic way of understanding or a systematic way of dissecting towards the truth. That's what argument means. Now, in any argument, if you look at the arguments, it consists of 2 things, right? So let's take the example that I have given here. All Finlanders use the latest smartphones, and therefore they are all technically very advanced. So this is an argument somebody is making. Now, so you can see in common life, we make statements such as this all the time. And if you dissect this particular statement, you will understand the building blocks of an argument. So the very first building block of an argument is what we call an evidence. So there is some evidence or some observation here. And then there is an implicit assumption. And these 2 is the left-hand side, and the right-hand side is the conclusion. Okay. So every argument consists of these three building blocks: 1, 2, and 3. Now, if you take this particular example, all Finlanders use the latest smartphone. So this particular part of the statement is basically an observation um, or an evidence. And therefore, they are all technically very advanced people, is the conclusion. And a lot of times in our arguments, the assumption is hidden, or it is, it's a commonsensical thing that we don't even bring it in the statements, but it is the implicit knowledge that we all have. So in this particular example, that implicit knowledge here is basically use latest smartphone. If you use latest smartphone, it kind of implies that you are technically advanced, right? So this is basically, if you look at it, that's what the clear assumption is. So other way of looking at this mental model is, if you look at in logic, we talk about deduction logic and induction logic. So deduction logic is all about there is some form of general truth, and then there is an instance of a particular version of the truth, and then this leads to some kind of a conclusion that I'm making. So anyway, if you look at the example, we will understand this clearly. So the famous example in philosophy is all men are mortal. So this is the general truth. I am a man is an observation. So this is basically this part. And so the conclusion I can derive from this is I am mortal. Right? So which means this all men are mortal is basically the assumption, or basically the general truth, which I don't even have to say because it's proven in the past. I only have a new evidence of this part, and which is actually now I'm putting these two together, leading to this this conclusion. So this is also, it's not anything new. Logic studies talk about it, but going back to our story of the argument building blocks. So these are all the arguments here. Now, how to validate or break someone's argument, or even to have a more scientific conversation on an argument is, you don't worry about the conclusions. Don't focus on it yet, but you will have to completely attack these two things. So attack this and attack this. You will be able to validate anybody's argument. So how do you attack it? In this particular example, we talked about all Finlanders use latest smartphones. That's an observation. So is this observation even valid? Where is this data point coming from? What do we mean by latest smartphones? First of all, qualify that. So get to the numbers of percentage of people. Do you mean to say even the old people there are using the latest smartphones? If so, what is that? So you can now break that part of the argument. And if it is proven that the Finlanders don't use, all of them don't, or when we say latest latest smartphone, how latest it is, and or what is a smartphone. So if you're able to break it, then the whole argument falls apart. Then break the assumption. So the assumption here is using smartphones means technically very advanced. So is that even valid? How does it matter really? I can use a smartphone and I can keep watching social media or some entertainment stuff. That does not make me technically an advanced person. And even some smartphones are so user friendly that it doesn't even I don't even need any skill to use a phone. So how is it really making me technically advanced? And what is technically advanced all about in the first place? So break that assumption, and then you are able to successfully break an argument. Yeah. So this is simple enough, I believe. If you take another example, just to brainstorm this a little bit. So let's say in my example, I performed very well in this interview. Very well in this interview. I'm going to succeed in this job. Okay. So if someone is making a statement such as this, how would you go about it? So what is the observation here?
Performed well in the interview.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
And then,
yeah.
and then my conclusion is I'm going to succeed in this job. What is the assumption that I'm making here?
Good interview means success in job.
Yes, exactly. So that's it. Now you know how to break these two things. Performed very well in the interview. How do you even know that I performed very well? Is it my feeling or has the interviewers told me?
Yeah.
And then, yeah, and breaking the assumption is interviews are not the reflective of what is needed in the job, not always. So, what gets you there won't keep you there. And therefore, you have a way of breaking that particular argument. Okay. So that's the mental model. Looking at any argument to have these evidence plus assumption equal to conclusion model helps us to think very, very clearly, whether when we are speaking or when we are hearing from people. Okay. Now, let's talk about another mental model, skill versus will. And this is basically a model that leaders would need. How do you choose a leadership style? How do you think about choosing a leadership style? If I ask that question, most of the times our mind will go, actually, I will give goals to people. I will track people very well. I will put some systems in place. How many defects? I will have a defect management Asana system. I can track people very well, and so forth. So we will say that. Some people will come and say, I'm great in painting visions. So I'll paint a vision for people, and then I'll make people follow me. So they will say something of that sort. But are we really thinking clearly about leadership here? Do we know what it takes? So one of the mental models that could be useful as leaders is the skill will framework. So basically, this framework talks about um a matrix such as that, where you can plot the skill on one side and the will on the other side. So now you have four quadrants, four different type of people you will suddenly come out with. So people over here who have very high skill and very high will. Okay. So suddenly, if you have a team of such people, the leadership style you should take is basically, I mean, this is you can differ here, but generally the leadership style is of empowering. So your people are really more skilled than you as a leader, and they have extremely great attitude and work ethics and everything. Why would you want to go in and micromanage them? Why do you want to put some kind of a spreadsheet where they should come and update timesheets? Why do you want to do that? If you do that, you are actually mismanaging such people. So all you have to do is to help them to achieve higher level potential, empower them, give them some and when they come and say this is my dream and this is what I want to do, as long as it's aligned with your company's objectives, empower them by offering them, giving them all kind of resources possible, setting up a team for them, and so forth. So empowering is the style that we need when your people are there. Now, what about this? It's an exact opposite, where people don't have skills and they do not have great ambitions or work ethics also. So if the team is like this, your style is basically, this is where you go into micromanaging. You go into the instructor mode, instruct style, which is you need to really, really set up some micro level goals. You have to sit behind the people, breathe on their neck, see that they are moving the tasks and learning from it quickly, building the skill, and see that they actually are enjoying the results that they are able to achieve. And slowly, you are actually going to move them to from here. From here, all of us want to move people to this, right? So this is what we want to achieve. This is what we want to achieve, right? So the instruction style is what you want to apply when people are there. But what about here? Some people are here. Your style of management in this case is you want to motivate people because they have the skill. They get very good skills. Just that they probably are having a down period. Are feeling low about something. Something is not working very well in their lives. They're not probably seeing the gratification. job satisfaction is poor, but they have great skills. So motivation is the way to go. As in set some goals and promise them an outcome, which will kind of make them realize that uh, they can do better. So motivation is the style. Suppose if your people are here, which means they are willing to work very hard and they are very self motivated, but they just are juniors. They don't have enough skill in a particular new initiative that you are trying to create, which means your style will be more of a guide. So you roll your sleeves, do it by example, show it to them, train them, create successive training programs for them, and then guide them along so that they will be able to upskill themselves and achieve. So another mental model that greatly helps you as a leader, if you look at your people. Now, you got to be very careful here. If you deal with a team which is a mixture of some people on the fourth quadrant, somewhere here, and some people are elsewhere, you have a little bit of complex approach that you have to make. So you have to create individual different styles for different people to manage it. Okay, finding it useful?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
definitely. I've been kind of relating to this recently with the manpower that I've been having in my cafe. So I'm kind of relating to this thing.
Awesome. You can apply and learn from this. So let us know what you learned.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. The next one is called PESTEL. I think this again informally we used to talk about PESTEL, which basically stands for political. P stands for political, environmental, societal, technological, economical, and legal. So we talked about major world events that are happening that you all want to be, I want to be also. I try to apply it for a technical solution, right? So we are into this business of building customer data platforms, right? So CDP. Now, if you look at CDP and applying this CDP in an enterprise, in our customer situations, we can use PESTEL again here, because a CDP is not just a technical application alone. It is going to cause a lot of changes in the customer organization, and that's what we mean by using PESTEL to understand this, right? So let's discuss this. So take a CDP and look at it from a political perspective, from our customers. What is it going to bring it for them? So usually when we go to our customers, there is always a power group that wants to use something transformational as a CDP to centralize or even to aggregate the power for themselves. So which means you have to talk about the stakeholders, basically, who are all the stakeholders that will be using this, and what are their roles and responsibilities. That's what we're talking about. Basically, we're talking about teams and roles and responsibilities. So a CDP, you will have teams such as chief data officers are part of this. The chief marketing officers are part of this. There are even chief product officers who will be innovating new products using a CDP to basically monetize the data. So you talk about from a political dimension, you will be able to advise the customer who the stakeholders are, what kind of team structures they need to put in place, so that the roles, responsibilities, and powers lies with the right people. So without setting this particular dimension correctly, the CDP initiative in an organization would completely fail. And we have seen instances of this happening, that either the marketing folks or the data folks, IT folks get the entire power of the CDP, and it doesn't go beyond that group in the organization, essentially limiting the total utilization of CDP itself. So political is a very important dimension to analyze. So what about economical? Economical dimension, we can talk about how do you really create the investment model? How much should the customer invest on this? At what phases? What stages? And what is the basic what do you call it, the revenue model? How are you going to get the returns from it? What use cases are going to run in what stage, and how much can you expect at any stage in the CDP? If it is just being implemented, what can you expect? As against more matured processes coming in place, what can you expect? And so forth, right? So without having this in the picture, and also a customer might get into it without having a clear view of what he has to invest into, which might again impact everything in the CDP. So social, you can talk about the various training aspects, how you should train people to use things, and creating a culture, because they're going to actually share data, right? So many particular lines of businesses will be sharing their data. So data sharing culture and why they should contribute. So again, very important aspect, right? If you don't get the culture right, people are not going to contribute data to your CDP, and you are going to eventually fail once again. So tech is the next dimension in the pestle. So this one we all know. Basically, just oh god. So I'm just going to highlight the different. Okay. So tech we know. What is the roadmap? What should be? What needs to be? What technology capabilities needs to be brought in at what stage? You don't need to have everything that the CDP needs at stage one itself. So having a roadmap of that, that's what this is all about. Then you talk about environmental. So in a tech domain, environmental probably doesn't mean much, but you can talk about, are you going to have your own data center? Are you going to have cloud native? You can still kind of stretch the metaphor into how you want to deploy and operate in the environmental dimension. Then the last dimension is the legal dimension, where you talk about data privacy, having the right regulations adopted in a particular country that we are deploying into. So clearly you can see, if you don't do this, that means we are not having any control of how to succeed in a technical initiative such as this. So leave it to you to make use of it in your, as you become leaders. Any initiatives, you can use this. Even public policies, when we are brainstorming, we can use this mental model to analyze it. Okay. Now, I think this is probably the last, or I have one more. Okay, I'll go quickly here. Hegel's dialectics, another great mental model. Once again, we probably have talked about it informally. Hegel is a German philosopher, if I'm not wrong. So he studied history quite a lot, and from the history, he distilled this particular system of thinking called dialectics. And he notes that anything that happens in the world is actually swinging between these two extremes, right? So to him, one of the extreme is called this is called the thesis. So this again is a generic term. I'll explain with some examples. And then the exact opposite of that is called antithesis. So just to remember that this does not mean one is good and one is bad. It just means opposing point of views. Okay? And the world actually swings between this particular thesis or this antithesis, and it kind of settles in some place at any point in time in the history. And this is what he calls as synthesis. Okay. So now let's take an example. If you talk about the freedom itself, right? So let's say human freedom is what we talk about in thesis. So we want complete autonomy, complete freedom, and open markets, capitalism, so and so forth. Whatever that relates to freedom. And on the other side, we are talking about the exact opposite of it, which is completely controlled society, or you can talk about dictatorship, even to that extent. And you can see that not either having complete freedom on this side or having a complete lack of autonomy, none of them is good. But you'll see that the world actually, sometimes it'll be here, it'll sink towards having more freedom, and sometimes it will say that, oh, this is not good for me, and I will swing to this point at some point in time, or I may even choose somewhere here in this spectrum, depending on different eras. Okay. So this is how Hegel looks at it, and we keep going this way and that way. When we talk about um, complete open markets and capitalism, and we soon realize that that is getting exploited in a certain way, that rich get richer, and then we move into a more sort of regulated markets, and then we will realize that the regulation kills innovation. I cannot create a new product in a completely regulated environment. It's creating so much bottlenecks, and then we relax it and we go back to unregulated open markets. So we see this happening in our own lives itself. The era of Clinton and probably the president before him. So it was complete open market where Wall Street is not so regulated, and then they were very innovative at that time. Everything flourished, but what we realized is the subprime crisis in 2008, which is because they were too innovative and they were too exploitative, leading to that crisis. And then when the crisis happened, we wanted to regulate Wall Street. We want to regulate bankers, how innovative they are. So we went into regulation too much. And then slowly the regulations are getting lifted. So this is basically, none of them is absolute. Okay. So the bottom line here is none of the states of thesis and antithesis is absolutely correct. It is all contextual in the time in history that actually dictates what is needed. So for example, do we need monarchy? Monarchy is not absolutely bad or it's absolutely good. But at a certain point in time, depending on where the society was in history, probably that was the best model that was needed. And then when society outgrew that, we needed democracy, so we moved away. And too much democracy creates also, in some countries we notice it's anarchy. Then we go into more controlled regimes. The dictators comes in and sort of create harmony very quickly, and then it becomes too much of a control, and people revolt and get out of it. So that's what Hegel's dialectics is all about. So we look at major world events. We have to look at in the spectrum of thesis and antithesis where they stand, and we will certainly know that probably that is what is right. That in the history, that's what is important. And when the shift happens, it is always we know if they are here, we know that the shift is going to go this way. It may go all the way to the end, but it may stop somewhere. So we are able to now predict the world, how much it should change, and for the good, and which direction the change should happen. So very macro mental model to understand the world. The last one is Eisenhower matrix, and this also we talked about it informally in the past, I believe. So we talk about if you have too much work coming on your way, whether you are a leader, a big leader, you have dimensions of work coming in. You have to deal with your team, you have to deal with your commitments to a technology, creating vision, setting team goals, and you have n number of different talks coming in your way. So Eisenhower, as a president, is the most powerful position in the world. He definitely is dealing with that. And then he came out with, I don't know whether he came out with it or his advisors came out with it. It's the Eisenhower matrix. So very simply put, it talks about what is urgent in one quadrant and what is important in another quadrant. So the moment you are able to categorize your work in this way, obviously this is what you will focus on, because this is more urgent and this is more important. So you really have to attend this. Something is here, it is obviously important, but I can take some time to solve it. So therefore you deprioritize that work. This kind of work, so this is basically deprioritize. And then if it is something here, it is neither urgent nor important. You may choose to delegate this to somebody else to do this because it really doesn't deserve your attention. Whereas something is here, which is of course urgent, but it is again not too important. Probably some other way of delegation or prioritization can be applied also. So this is one way to sort through, to have a very clarity in thinking. This mental model, I think everybody needs this. We need to be, because this is what makes us frugal, with respect to time and resources. And all of us have limited time and limited resources, right? So, but if we have a mental model of being frugal, this is when we become successful very quickly. So, although it's very commonsensical, simple, but it's the most difficult to apply. We keep forgetting this, but if we really, really internalize this, this is going to change our lives. Okay, that's all I have. My idea is to get us all excited about the mental models, and then there are a lot of materials that you can look at. So maybe I'll just start to write some books names that will help us to get started with it, or even I can post it in our group. Number one is called the Little Book of Reasoning, the Little Blue Book of Reasoning. So search for it. So this is a great book in thinking clearly, in logic, etc. Okay, my iPad is a little bit slow. Okay, that came back. And then this second book is called the Decision Book. So this has about 50 different models that help us to make decisions. And then the next one is called Super Thinking. Again, this is a collection of mental models. So super thinking is about 300 mental models, but mostly it goes into what are the fallacies in our thinking and how to correct them. So that's the other one. I believe if we start with these three, it's going to give us a good library of mental models, and we can keep reading and sharing in the group. Okay. We can, this is the end of the talk. We may continue to discuss by stopping the recording also.